Anyway, Nadine Dorries is here, former Tory minister, of course, friend of the station, defected to Reform UK just before their conference last weekend. Very good morning to you, Nadine.
Good morning, Mike.
Good to see you. How did you enjoy that conference? It was pretty amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really like something else. I absolutely enjoyed it. I don't know what I was expecting, but I'll tell you what it was like. It was like the Conservative Party conferences of days gone by, when members were involved and people were excited and were all joined together with a kind of like a central focus, which was to get into government. It was really quite exciting.
Yes. And are you sort of hopeful that you might return to the frontline fray, if you like, in that sense?
Well, I just wouldn't rule anything out. I mean, I never say never because that's silly. But I don't know, Mike, honestly, I have no idea.
Right. Well, there's a bit of time to go. Let's talk about Peter Mandelson. He's on the front pages. You might remember him from his time in the government of Tony Blair, which is when he started his relationship, it would seem, with Jeffrey Epstein. It's all very bizarre, and I don't see really how he manages to survive as ambassador to the US. Does he?
You know, it doesn't matter where you turn at the moment in the Labour Party or where you look, whether it's Peter Mandelson or it's Angela Rayner, it was Louise Haigh, it was Tulip Siddiq. It doesn't really matter where you look, it's failing. It's the individuals involved are just, you know, I'll tell you what somebody told me recently. They said to me, they're a Labour Party supporter, and they said this: we were supposed to be better than you lot, and it looks like we're going to be worse. Yeah. And I think that really, for me, encapsulated exactly what's happening in Labour, actually what's happening in both of those traditional parties of government, both Conservative and Labour. One is as bad as the other. Both are failing and have failed in a number of ways. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Mandelson's position, that creepy photograph of him sat in his dressing gown, where the card was shown next to him with Epstein. You've got it up there. That's just a vomit-inducing photograph. He sat with a paedophile, you know? Yeah. Of course, his position is now untenable.
Well, I think it is. Have a look at this, though, because Harry Cole, as you may know, has gone over to rebase himself in the United States of America. He's got a new show called Harry Cole Saves the West. Very modest name for a show, that. He got an exclusive.
Very modest for Harry.
He got a great exclusive, though, with Peter Mandelson, and here it is.
One, I feel a tremendous sense, a profound sense of sympathy for those people, those women who suffered as a result of his behaviour and his illegal criminal activities. And secondly, I regret very, very deeply indeed carrying on that association with him for far longer than I should have done. And I regret very much that I fell for his lies. I fell and accepted assurances that he had given me about his indictment, his original criminal case in Florida. Like very many people, I took at face value what he said. With hindsight, with fresh information, many years later, we realized that we had been wrong to believe him. He's a charismatic criminal liar, we now see. And I regret very much indeed, I felt it like an albatross around my neck since his death in 2018 or 19, when it was. I feel a tremendous sense of regret, not only that I met him in the first place, but that I continued the association, and I took at face value the lies that he fed me and many others.
He says he regrets it, but unfortunately the facts would suggest otherwise, because he spent time in his apartment in Manhattan, his townhouse, in fact, in Manhattan, while Epstein was in jail for trying to procure sex with a minor.
Yeah, I mean, it took a photograph of Mandelson in his dressing gown at Epstein's poolside, and the revelation of the notes and the cards that he sent to Epstein to get that apology and those regrets on camera to Harry Cole. I mean, it stinks, and that's what's wrong with politics today. There are no moral standards. He has to be caught out, like Angela Rayner has to be caught out before he issues the apology, or before he makes the claim that he has regrets about what he did. It's, you know, and also the bit about him staying in that apartment, we know from what we've heard about the Epstein case, those apartments, the walls were full of explicit hard porn artwork. Did he not? And the guy was in jail for an offence relating to it being a paedophile. Did he not put the two and two together? Did he not? I just find it unbelievable, just unbelievable. Any decent person would think, no, I'm not staying in that guy's apartment. This artwork all over the walls tells me all I need to know. And the guy's in jail. No, I better get out of here.
Right. Well, one of the portions of the sort of rather bizarre card, 10-page card that he gave him for his birthday, was that, you know, it's so lovely when you're not here. You always leave such interesting friends. And there's a picture of a very young girl not wearing very many clothes.
Yeah, I mean, it says it all, doesn't he? What does Mandelson think he's doing? Trying to absolve himself in an interview with Harry Cole and say, it's a bit like Prince Andrew, isn't it? You know, trying to say to the world, oh, look, this wasn't me. I'm really sorry. I didn't know. It doesn't work. It doesn't cut it. You're the ambassador. You are a very senior politician. You're a very smart man. You knew exactly what was going on. Do the decent thing. Resign now.
Yeah.
Will he? Of course he won't. He'll wait until the very last moment when he's actually pushed. Mandelson should go now.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with that, apart from possibly Keir Starmer, who'd rather you didn't talk about it. But let's go back to what you said last week in your column in the Mail, and when we talked about, you know, your transferring, if you like, or defecting to reform. You said the Tory party was dead. Do you think it's dead, unable to be resuscitated, or can it be brought back to life?
But, you know, it's always been held up as a virtue by the Conservative Party and Conservative MPs, particularly the Wets, those on the left of the party, that the Conservative Party is a broad church. And frankly, evidence shows us that when you have a party which has MPs to the left and to the right, that you cannot govern, because those broad church words actually are just replacements for dysfunctional and divided. And divided parties just can't govern effectively. And that's what we've seen with the Conservative Party. Now, unless the Conservative Party changes it's the way it functions, unless it says to future candidates, we have to have a set of principles and ideology that you have to adhere to when you're an MP and vote for, then I'm afraid it is dead. It's impossible for the Conservative Party to function in its existing form. It is dead. It can't be a party of government, and that's a fact.
Well, I speak to so many people, obviously, as you know, on this show, who call themselves former Tory voters, who say, we'll just never vote for them again. And they often say to me, why do you even bother getting Tories on? You know, I mean, we've just had Richard Holden on. You're a nice enough guy, decent enough bloke, but, you know people say, well, what's the point of listening to them about anything? Because 14 years they were in, and they're largely responsible for a lot of the trouble that we now find ourselves in.
So I'll take Richard Holden as a case in point. You know, he's my PPS and I was Secretary of State. So I expect a certain standard behaviour from MPs.
Yeah.
And, you know, Richard Holden fell way below that standard, that expected standard. He was party chairman. He waited till the last minute. He imposed himself on a constituency, gave them a choice of one, which was just him. They had no option but to take him. That is wrong. That is not the right way to behave. And I'm afraid in many MPs in the Conservative Party, if you look at the way they behave, it doesn't chime with what the public expect in terms of probity and standards from the people they elect as MPs. Now, Richard, you know, yeah, he's a very nice chap when you speak to him on a one-to-one, but he hasn't behaved in the way that he should as an MP. And that's the problem with politicians. So many don't.
Yes, and that is what people now see. I mean, you know, yesterday we were reporting on Ed Miliband having put a heat pump in his house in North London, but not in Doncaster, where he's still got a gas boiler. You know, I don't mind if he's got a gas boiler, but he apparently minds if I have one, because he wants me to get rid of mine. Not only has he got one, he's also charging me his electricity bill and his gas bill. And I'm going, well, what am I doing? Am I some kind of a mug? Why am I paying his bill as well as mine?
Exactly. It's the hypocrisy. And that's a quality which I think is running through both of what were the traditional parties of government, Labour and Conservative. It's hypocrisy. They're riven with it. That's why I defected to reform. It's time to look to the future. It's time to look for answers as to what is going to happen to the country in the future. It's no longer good enough for us to rely on both Labour and Conservatives who have failed over and over again. I think it's time for a fresh start. As someone said to me at the weekend, it's time for a revolution in politics. And I couldn't agree more. That's where we are. It's time for a revolution. It's time for reform. And you've just put that thing up. I felt like an aged pop star walking out on
That was great. Do you know, I had to do a panel up there, right? And I had no idea it was going to be all sort of rock and roll and walking out onto a big stage. I thought it was going to be like the normal kind of, you know, boring party conference where you sit in a room which is a bit hot and kind of sweaty and you know, you're hoping that it won't last too long before you can get out and get a drink. But it was really quite a remarkable event. And yeah, very uplifting for a lot of the people there, and they all seem to be very excited about it. They're all massive fans of this show and of talk and everything else. You know, what they're not fans of, though, some of them, is having too many Tories jumping ship into reform.
Well, I think I think, and I understand that completely, obviously, but they're not getting too many Labour supporters at the moment. They will do, and they are going to. And well, I shouldn't say that. I think they are getting a number of Labour supporters. What they're not getting is Labour defections in any numbers. But what I would say is, look to the future. Look to Nigel thinks that the election could come as soon as 2027, and he's quite right to think so. Without going down the economic arguments, that is a very feasible option that we could have an election that soon. But what I would say is this, that if Labour are splitting right down the middle, there will be almost two Labour parties. There'll be the pro-Gaza independents who will align with probably Polanski, who's the new left-wing firebrand leader of the Green Party, probably the breakaways, the Corbynites from the Labour Party. And there is going to, whether they will stand as two parties, I have no idea, but you will have that division in Labour. What we can't do is go into an election with the right divided, because if we do, then Labour will win. And it will be a far worse government next time than we've had this time. And I can't even bear the thought of that.
No.
So there will have to be some, and I'm almost nervous to say this because I know not a lot of reform members are there yet, but there may have to be some kind of accommodation in the future. Now, will that look like 2019 when reform stood down a number of candidates in Conservative seats so that the Conservatives could win? Well, I would say that possibly, but maybe if that happens next time, I'd be very careful which Conservative MPs that reform stood their candidates down in. They would certainly not be Wet, certainly not be Remainers, certainly not be MPs on the left of the Conservative Party. And I would also say that a proper deal would need to be done, where if reform stood down a candidate in a seat where there was an established Conservative, that Conservative who was on the right side of the arguments would have to pledge an allegiance to reform in terms of how they would vote in the voting lobby in future. So I think there could be some kind of accommodation looking forward. But, you know, that is for the future. It isn't for now. But I really understand the concerns of some of those people in reform. They're a new, emerging, exciting party. They have a chance to take power. And they want to take it on their own terms. And I totally get it. I support them, and I'll do everything I can to help them achieve that.
Because one of Nigel Farage's fears, I suppose, if you like, he revealed to Laura Kuenssberg at the weekend when he said, you know, don't ask me about how we're going to do anything at the moment because we haven't got enough people. We don't have enough senior people at government level who've ever worked in government. We certainly haven't got as many serious candidates perhaps as they need to get. I think they need to get something like 5,000 candidates just for the local elections in May before they can attack all the places they want to go. So, I mean, in terms of if and when reform do get in, you know, you've talked a lot about in your writings, you know, the blob, but also the establishment, the way that the Tory party kind of stitched people up in various ways, shapes and forms, the plot, as we know. Can they somehow overcome that, do you think, because they're not part of that establishment?
Look, I'm not going to say it's going to be easy. It isn't. It's going to be very difficult. The numbers alone are kind of like overwhelming almost. So, but they're running as fast as they can. And I think on a daily basis, Reform have got good people going into good jobs. And so, you know, I met the person who's responsible for candidates myself at conference. I think part of the reason why I'm there, he also, nobody can now throw the accusation at Nigel. You have nobody in Reform who's got any experience of government. I've served at every level of government and run a department. And I think that's where I see myself being able to lend my experience to Reform. it's the transition. It's the transition from being not even Her Majesty's opposition, but from being a small party in government to Westminster to being in government. That transition is hard enough if you're the party in opposition. That's where I see my own experience being able to help reform, is making that, because it is complex. It is not just a case of take the keys to number 10 and barge in. Nigel would want to be successful from day one, would want to achieve from day one. So that's where I see myself lending my own expertise. And there will be others like me coming along. I am not going to be the only former cabinet minister who steps across to reform.
Well, Jacob Rees-Mogg said, didn't he, at the weekend, that he would be happy to advise, although he wouldn't necessarily join reform, he would be happy to advise how they might want to deal with certain situations. But of course, a lot of people last weekend also said, well, you must be bringing Boris Johnson with you, obviously, because that would be why, which I think is a bit of an insult to you, actually, because I mean, you're not like sort of joined at the hip with him, are you?
No, and absolutely not. And I don't ever see, and I saw this kind of like the story ran away. Boris Johnson is never going to join reform. He's a former prime minister, a former Conservative prime minister. It's even absurd for people to suggest that. And I think people who are suggesting that just aren't using their heads and thinking that's never going to happen. But there's also the situation that Nigel, reform don't need Boris Johnson to join reform. So they're doing terribly well on their own at the moment. Thank you very much. So Nigel is polling a solid 30% in the poll. And he isn't just doing that as a one-off. He's been doing that consistently. Now the big challenge for reform is we're consolidating at 30%. How do we move that up to 35%? That's the next kind of like year's work, I think, that reform have to undertake. And consolidate at 30. Now, how do we move further up? And I'm not dismissing your point, but for anybody to say that Boris Johnson should join reform don't want him to join reform, and Boris Johnson doesn't want to join reform. So it's people just aren't thinking. I think they're just asking those questions for media hits or clicks.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and honestly, Mike, I'm here to look to the future. I'm not here to talk about the past.
Yeah.
I left government 2 years ago now. I'm not here to talk about the Conservative Party or the government of the past. I'll never criticise the Prime Minister that I served. I never criticised the cabinet that I served in. A lot happened between us leaving, Rishi Sunak taking over, Kemi Badenoch. A lot of water has gone under the bridge since. But I'm looking to the future, and I'm looking to a reform government. And that's where my attention and my focus is going to be.
And what do you think? So, I mean, Boris Johnson, a significant political figure in our recent history. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you that question, but what does he make of the rise of reform? And do you think he welcomes it?
Look, Mike, I'm just not going to discuss Boris Johnson, and because I want to talk about Nigel Farage and reform, and I think that's what we should be discussing, because now I'm a member of reform.
Okay. All right, then. Are you going to be working on policy for them as well? Because there's a lot of gaps. A lot of people were asking me at the weekend as well. There's not a policy document on absolutely everything, because there isn't, because there hasn't really necessarily been time. Will you be working on that kind of thing with them? What's your role going to be?
So Zia Youssef has been made head of policy, which is, he's an incredibly impressive operator. He's been put in charge of policy, I think, over the next year. I would give him a year to have that pretty much sorted. But what I would say is, we know the mood music of reform. We know what they stand for. We can kind of almost guess the way those policies are going to go. Nigel has made a very good job over the summer of articulating already certain policies, such as how we deal with illegal immigration, law and order. He's been huge on. I think we're probably going to see more in policy on the way of the economy and some of the other issues. But, give Zia a year, I would say. I'd say give him till this time next year in conference. And I think anybody will probably find it difficult to level the accusation that reform doesn't have policy or meat on its policy bones a year from now.
Okay. Nadine, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. See you again soon. Have a lovely day. Nadine Dorries, former Tory minister, now reform.